Thank you so much, Mr. Ranking Member. Good afternoon. I want to thank our incredible panel who have come from all across the country to be here with us, and thank you to our audience. I'm looking forward to hearing your critical insight into the current state of gun violence in America and the path that we need to go towards to prevent gun violence. This issue is very near and dear to me. As was mentioned, I've spent most of my life fighting to end gun violence. It was the Sandy Hook shooting in 2012 that pushed me to become an advocate in the first place. And learning the stories and coming up for that vigil really changed 15-year-old Maxwell Frost's life and really presented me with a call to action that I then answered. After that, I got involved in politics, but it was all because of gun violence prevention. In 2021, gun violence surpassed car accidents as the leading cause of death for children, being responsible for 1 in 5 child deaths. And this isn't just about mass shootings. I always like to tell people, think about all the carnage. Think about all the media. Think about all the trauma and stories that mass shootings bring. And then know the fact that mass shootings account for 1% of gun violence. I don't say that to diminish mass shootings. I say that so people can really recognize how huge this issue is and how many lives it takes on a daily basis. And the other number that we don't often talk about is the people who are shot who then survive, and then the people who are surviving on a daily basis in their community with daily gun violence and community gun violence that we see that predominantly impacts black and brown folks. Black trans women and LGBTQ plus people also being disproportionately impacted by gun violence. In fact, just 2 weeks ago, London Price, a black trans woman in my state of Florida, was pistol whipped and shot to death in front of her grandmother in South Florida. Not a peep from the governor, not a peep from state legislators who claim to fight for all Floridians. Recently, or back in March, I introduced my first bill, which was to create a federal office of gun violence prevention. Something that I actually had been fighting for long before I got to Congress when I was a national organizing director at March for Our Lives. This was a call to action of the administration and of Congress given by the movement over the last 3 to 4 years. And it meant a world when the White House took that bill and made it, implemented it via executive order. And now, for the first time in our country's history, we have a federal office of gun violence prevention. Staffed, and the staff is really important here because you can make an office and staff it with a bunch of hacks who don't know what they're doing, but the president didn't do that. He put in charge Greg Jackson and Rob Wilcox, 2 survivors of gun violence who have been doing this work for a long time, and led by Stephanie Feldman, who's been advocating for this work from within the White House. And they're working alongside gun violence prevention advocates, leaders from across the country, and I'm really excited to see the work that they do. And that win is because of the movement that had been fighting for it for upwards of about 4 years on that very specific ask. And it's not a coincidence that just a week and a half after that office came to be, my district in the city of Orlando received a check of $1.5 million from the Department of Justice Community Violence Intervention Initiative. And we're not done. We're going to get a lot more money. But the reason why this money's been dispersed in such a quick way is because of the Office of Gun Violence Prevention that is advocating and fighting for the speedy implementation of the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. That was also a result of the tireless work of advocates and people who have been fighting for it within the organizations and movement. They also got right to work on the third mission and one of the most important missions of the office, which is to act like a FEMA, to go and respond when gun violence strikes a community. We saw them in the ground in Maine to support survivors and advocates there. In fact, it was just last week that a colleague of mine, Marjorie Greene, put in an amendment to defund the Office of Gun Violence Prevention. One that kind of skirted past the media. A lot of people don't know about this. We voted on this amendment on the floor. And it worried me because I thought they would have a good chance of defunding this office. But we got right to work, speaking with Republicans, speaking with Democrats that don't often vote the way we want them to vote on this issue. And in a bipartisan way, we defeated that amendment with 8 Republicans who voted against it, which I think shows that there is a light at the end of the tunnel with this issue. The gun lobby is more afraid now more than ever as they see a multiracial, multi-generational army of Americans who are not going to relent on the demands for common sense gun reform. And we got to be clear, organizations like the NRA and like organizations that say that they are an advocacy group for gun owners, it's a bunch of BS. They're not an advocacy group. They're fronts for the gun lobby. And this issue, much like many other issues, in part we don't see good work on in the federal government because of corporate greed being valued over the lives of people and humans. And gun violence prevention is not any different in that retrospect. As our communities once again reel from the senseless loss of life in Maine and even more senseless void of congressional action, it is critical that we hear from survivors and leaders in the gun violence prevention movement to discuss a coordinated response to these tragedies. Our communities, the innocent victims, and the families who have lost loved ones deserve more than our thoughts and prayers. They deserve our commitment to a path forward in a world without gun violence, looking at the issue holistically, from school shootings to mass shootings, to shootings that happen in our community, to shootings by police officers, where if you are a black teenage male, the most likely cause of death for you is to be shot and killed by the police. This is all gun violence, and we have to attack this issue in a holistic way. Thank you, and I yield back.